I want to introduce everybody and welcome everyone to CCIT's live Facebook event. We are live, and if you're watching us, that's great. We would first like to thank our host, TSCC 2232 MetroPlace, for hosting this event. My name is Joy Matthews, and I'll be facilitating a discussion here with respect to our guests. And at this time, I'd like to just introduce our guests.
Hi, my name is JJ Hugh. I am the co-founder of Get Quorum. We are an online condominium governance platform, and we do electronic voting and the distribution of notices.
Okay. And Sally Thompson with Synergy Partners. I'm a building engineer, and I focus on existing buildings, so taking care of existing buildings.
I'm Sue Langlois, founder of DigiNotice. We install digital notice boards into elevators and lobbies for condos. We also run the communication programs that provides the content to those displays.
Okay, great. And I'm Joy Matthews. I'm a condo lawyer, and I will not be talking about law today. And the focus of today's Facebook chat is going to be on technology and condos and how the interplay affects governance. There's a changing culture in condos, and a lot of people just don't get what technology means in condos. And frankly, I'm from the generation that understands how to use the internet, but not Twitter or Instagram or any of that stuff. So I purposely wanted to be a part of this to learn as much as I can. Just so those of you who've never joined us on the Facebook chat, this is not a typical kind of scenario. We're just going to be informal, casual. We're going to make this somewhat fast and furious, but we're going to talk about a lot of topics and try to whet your appetite so you can go back to your boards, your owners, and consider what you can do in your particular condos. That being said, there's going to be some structure in the sense that I want to make sure we cover three main topics. We're going to talk about governance generally and technology related to that, communications, and also buildings in general. So let's start off with an interesting topic that's talked about quite a bit, which are proxies. Proxies have been fought over for years, and now the government's instantiated a standardized form of proxies. So, JJ, let's talk about governance in general and proxies. Maybe we can start with that first.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been hearing throughout the industry now is that with the new standardized proxy, it's just super complicated and really hard for owners to fill out. Anecdotally, I've been hearing from managers that said that where they used to be able to squeak by with getting quorum for their meetings, now it's not yet the case anymore because owners are just refusing to complete the proxies because they're so difficult. And what condos can do to help with that is to use a service that collects these proxies electronically. Like the owners would get like an email with the link to complete their proxy. And the tools usually guide owners through filling it out. So it like kind of like how like if you ever fill out like an income tax form or whatever, like it's just so many boxes to fill out, but you can use a wizard.
Nice
to kind
comparison, by the way.
Yeah.
Proxy and the income tax.
Well, I mean, like if you ever looked at it, there's so many boxes to fill out. It's crazy, like what you need to do, and so you can use like those like the tax wizards to kind of help you fill out all these things.
Right.
Similarly, these tools with electronic proxies that kind of guide you through the process, so that there's no question as to whether the proxy is kind of like done or not. And historically speaking, a lot of clients that we've worked with, once they use a service like this, they just never have problems with quorum anymore.
Okay, so let me ask you a quick question. How does this work? How do you, is it in the cloud? Is it on a website? Is it in your computer?
Sure.
Just from,
It's
basics of it.
So some providers are cloud-based, so you go to a website to complete the proxy or complete your vote, and usually an owner would receive an email. So the condominium would need to provide the records of service. So the owners would get an email with a link and maybe an access code to verify that that they are or authorize themselves to complete the proxy. You click on the link, you enter your access code, or more sophisticated systems have like an embedded code in the link already.
Right.
So you click on it, you go to fill it out. You're already verified that you are an owner, and it takes maybe a minute or two, and you're done. You've completed your proxy online.
It sounds simple. I'll be honest.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so how does an owner actually understand this? How does a board, let's say, communicate this to the ownership? How would they do that?
Yeah, so there's two ways. One, it's on the onus of the provider to make sure that their system is designed really well so that it's understandable by everyone.
Okay.
And the second way is for communication, to educate the owners on why it is so important for them to get involved and vote, whether it be electing directors or if you don't have quorum, it's like the meeting is not valid, it's got to be rescheduled again, or if you're even passing a bylaw, to explain to the owners why it is beneficial for a bylaw to be passed. And communication is really key. Communications and education is really key here.
Yeah, they seem to be central tenants in this. So how can technology help us communicate and educate? Comments on that?
Well, in my experience, a digital display is by far the most effective way to reach the most people as a building.
So a digital display.
So a digital notice board. So you
Okay.
replace the cork bulletin board that you currently have in your elevator. If you have a condo that has an elevator, not all do.
Just to highlight something, is that
so-
possibly?
If you have a lobby, something like that. Yeah. So there's actually not usually that big in an elevator. You have to have a palatial elevator put that. But a digital display replacing the cork bulletin board makes a big difference because you can post a lot of different notices at once and they rotate through. And when you have something going on, like for instance, you're trying to get people to come out to the AGM and you need people to fill out proxies, a simple way to do that would be a campaign that educates people about a service that you're using that's going to allow them to fill out the proxies. It's going to be a lot easier. Perhaps you could even include a QR code, a picture of a QR code that we've finally found a use for one of those,
Could you just explain that just for,
a
my
QR
benefit
code is
as
like
well?
that funny little, it's like a little square. It's a little funny little picture almost. Looks like a mishmash of
That's on all products and labels.
Black
you see
squares,
it, so you buy a bottle of wine and you click on that and it take you to the wine's website or tell you maybe what kind of good food will pair with that wine. So it's a bit of a hook to get people to get to more information. So perhaps
that's on the display?
Absolutely, because of a display you're not going to explain the whole process perhaps. People only have a few seconds to read something. So that could just lead, they could take a picture of that with their phone, it could lead them through to a service like JJ's, and that way they could automatically, get the vote, fill out their proxy.
Get into this kind of like the procedural aspect. How do they scan it? Do they need to have an app on their phone?
Yeah, there is an app, like QR code reader, Android reader. I think new phones, though, come automatically. So you just hold it up and it automatically knows to take the picture of
Right, so
the code.
this is a huge educational obstacle, I guess, because one, the board has to, I guess, install, displays, but then educate the owners to get this app, to be able to click on. In your experience, does this work in the sense of?
Oh, for sure. And the thing is with communication, I mean, it's always a big challenge for condos, and it's the number one complaint quite often at an AGM.
Yeah,
we don't know what's going on. But and I usually divide it into the selfie information and the healthy information. So if you're going to turn off my water or my party room's not going to be open and I have people coming over, those are the things that are going to affect me personally. I'm going to open that email. I want to know, what do you mean the water's off today?
Yeah.
But the healthy information is the stuff they don't know that can actually hurt them financially, because people don't know how to properly manage their waste, or they don't know that they should show up for their AGM, or at least attend or fill out a proxy. That's the sort of stuff that costs a lot of money just by people not doing it. Water savings, all sorts of things. So the investment in a communication system that everybody is going to see because they have to ride the elevator to get home makes sense.
But you can pair that QR code up with the other information. Are you going to tell them why it's important for them
Oh,
to
for
fill
sure.
out
You could-
their
yeah, you
proxy,
could
and
pair
they
it
could
up
go
with-
to their email, but they could also do it. So you're going to capture
You could
different
capture
people.
all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
You can use a QR
So it's not
code
just
to
one medium. You can
Yeah,
use
exactly.
the
all
app.
sorts of things. Yeah,
Okay. So
and
what,
then,
just in your experience, just in general, what are the hottest topics that you kind of put up on these notices?
these days, noise is always a big one, and by
Noise,
far the marijuana becoming legalized
man.
is a big topic.
Yeah.
People are freaking
Weed,
out. Wondering,
cannabis,
it's gonna be smelly, and
It is
And I
silly.
think the problem with that one is that it's more of a nuisance, and most people just don't get it. And it really comes down more specifically, not just nuisance, the smoke and the odor that comes from that type of use. So, perfect thought. Any technology that we can attack that issue of odor and smells? Is there anything going on there in that world?
Well, it's interesting because we've been fighting tobacco odor transfer for years, not terribly successfully, but you keep working away at it. I have a feeling that the smell of cannabis burning is more pervasive even than tobacco, given the smells that I have smelled in corridors lately. Mm-hmm. And so we're certainly expecting a huge number of people to be upset about it and trying to resolve it. And it's actually very frustrating in a building, because buildings are very, especially high-rise buildings, very complex interactions between the various systems in the building. So it's interesting. I'm reading some testing about how to use different testing techniques to try and determine the source of odor transfer, pinpoint how odor is transferring. And so there's a couple of things that, there's fine particulate measurements, for example, where there's a sensor that can measure the degree of fine particulates in a space. Okay. And so you can use that to put some particulates in, so smoke of some sort, in a suite, and see how it transfers into the adjacent suite. And that can help you to pinpoint where things are transferring. Or there's even tracer gases, where you can actually put different tracer gases in different source locations and then see how they impact an incoming location. So it sounds really great, right? Because
sounds incredible.
Yeah, we can do this testing, right? We're going to be able to test it. But the interesting thing about all of the papers and all the research that I've read so far is on these high-rise buildings. Mm. You can do all that testing and you can air seal until you're blue in the face, and you're still going to get some transfer. And so I think the issue becomes much more, it's much bigger. It's about, we're saying high-rise buildings, a high-rise building is like a chimney, right? Okay. It's in the winter when it's cold outside and it's hot in the building, the hot air wants to rise. And so the building almost breathes, right? It sucks air in at the bottom and it blows air out at the top. And that's a huge force that's very difficult to overcome with any mechanical means. And then you layer on top of that, have I opened my window or not opened my window? Do I have my exhaust fan on and my neighbor doesn't, or my neighbor does? So now I'm sucking and blowing in all kinds of directions. And so what's fascinating to my mind is that, I read these papers. There's one from Korea I read. There's one from Minnesota, where they studied high-rise buildings in a winter climate similar to ours. And the conclusion they reached was, you can spend a lot of money trying to fix this stuff, but really you got to ban smoking in multifamily buildings. Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so which is a little bit frustrating. I think the other, another huge compounding factor that I think people are not paying attention to, which is related to technology too, is the make-up air units. Okay, so most of the buildings have you're going to ask me probably what that is that right?
Well, I was just going to ask you, because lawyers always want to sound smart, and we can fake it till we make it. We really don't know what we're talking about when it comes to make-up air units. So can you explain what that is?
So buildings, humans need ventilation, so we want to give everybody fresh air.
Right.
And so there's kind of two strategies for that. The older buildings all had a big fan up on the roof, a make-up air unit, that is making up the air that is, in theory, lost when you turn on your exhaust fans. So we blow air into the corridors, and then it gets drawn out through leakage or through your exhaust fans. And in those buildings, we designed them originally with a certain flow, and then over the last 15 years, almost every building has gone through and retrofit that unit with what we call a variable frequency drive, i.e. they're slowing it down to save energy. But what the result of that is that if you had a balanced system where your fan is up on the roof blowing down this pipe and air is coming out at each floor and you've balanced it, then you turn that fan down, so now you're blowing less air. It doesn't very cooperatively now deliver 60% of the air to each floor. It still delivers the design amount to the top few floors and delivers nothing to the bottom floors. And so you add that on top of these odor issues, and it just becomes really clear that it's not just about fixing the unit. You have to look at the whole building from top to bottom. And if you want to not have those dead areas from a make-up air perspective, you've got to run that unit, but that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you got to put it all together, and it's very difficult.
And I can imagine managers and boards trying to struggle with some of these techie issues. And in particular, now that you've mentioned that, repair maintenance obligations in units. Leaks are by far a common complaint. Moisture and development and all that stuff, condensation. Are there any new technologies to kind of address those?
I would actually say it's interesting, because the biggest one we see, especially in the new buildings, is major leaks. Right. Yep. So, and it seems to me that it's failures of workmanship. An elbow on a pipe comes apart. I've seen several where the drain pipe that comes all the way down from the main roof, which is taking a huge amount of water in a rain, blows apart at the elbow and floods out the whole lobby. Right. You see the new ones. Yeah. Or the worst is when a big flood that's up on the 20th floor and floods all the suites down below. And then obviously that has downstream impact on your insurance deductible for the corporation. So obviously, to me, there's huge incentive, and we all need to be thinking, how do we stop that from happening? How do we prevent it rather than just dealing with it, which is what we're doing right now, right? Deal with the problems. And so lately I've seen a couple of buildings where they've just put in these such simple little moisture detectors, so that there's a little wire that sits down on the floor, and if it feels moisture, it's going to beep. Well, in the old days, they used to beep locally, but of course these days now it's Wi-Fi connected, so it's going to send a message off to the super or to the property manager or to your security firm, so they get an alarm.
Is that connected to the communication piece? Are we talking about when you have a detector, a smart detector that connects to the phone? Is that going to?
Well, the interesting thing is it's Wi-Fi, right? So I need an internet service of some sort, and I'm sure, Sue, when you're putting in, you need internet as well on the boards. What are you finding that people have a good enough system, or they need?
The biggest challenge I think right now is that managers are not usually trained in basic IT 101. So the big challenge is they have a network, they have numerous things connected to that network, and they don't really know how it's set up or how many things are attached or who did what where. Over the course of years, different IT guys come in, they get something working, just get it working. So they got whatever it is gets working, and then nobody hands over a schematic or a list of what actually got done and where. So, open up any closet, any electrical closet, you look and see, oh, what's that Cat 5 running to? Who knows? Nobody's there's no label on it, it's just running through the building. Then you go into another room and find a mess of wires. So it would be really helpful if there was a 101. Everybody uses the internet every day, and very few people know actually what happens when you turn on that computer or phone. So
I think it's a bit tough though, because it's like managers are already so busy working on all these other things, and IT knowledge is actually it's like its own field. You can have some basic IT knowledge, but that's still not going to be enough in order to kind of manage and set up your own network. So it's what I used to do in my condo is that I would go and I would be the volunteer IT guy. But what happens when I'm
always
no
need
longer
an
there?
IT friend.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or you just have a son who's good at it.
There you go.
Takes longer, but
like commercial buildings usually have their own IT infrastructure, and they have their own IT people or professionals to kind of do this, right? And I find that it's kind of strange that in residential buildings this same kind of thought is not applied to it, right? They don't have someone dedicated to the IT of the building, and I get it, you're trying to save money, but at the same time, this is the trade-off.
You end up spending more in the end in some cases.
You know what though? I think the systems have grown in spite of themselves, right? So they had whatever system they had in, and then someone says we need wireless in the exercise room because we bought this new treadmill that you can stream something on, right? And so they do that, and then we needed something in the party room and the meeting room, and then suddenly, and they don't understand, they don't have enough bandwidth, or they don't have enough, whatever it needs, and then you try and implement some of these systems like your boards or the leak detection, that everything is Wi-Fi hungry, right? And so I think the point though is that boards need to start seeing that technology backbone as a sort of cost center that they need to be paying attention to.
It's actually interesting you mentioned that, because from everything that I've been hearing from the industry and just in general is that it's harder for older buildings to get up to speed with the newer technology. It's easier for newer buildings to get
that's
upgraded.
A big issue.
Yeah.
Older buildings and technology.
For example, in my building, we were trying to get the Bell fiber upgrade kind of going on, right? And if you aren't aware, it's like the Bell would come in and they would install fiber into all the suites in your building. And so they were like, it's going to be easy. We're just going to feed through everything through the existing conduits. But the problem was that, as your building ages and the ground shifts or whatever, these conduits, they may collapse. And that's what happened to ours. And so now it's no longer easy to get in. And so it's even though the service is still trying to be installed, there are all these things that you need to worry about now, which is sort of if you can't go through the conduits, then what do? You got to drill through people's walls and stuff.
Right.
I don't know. So it's tougher for older buildings.
Do you know what though? It's tough in the new buildings too, because I'll tell you, when we go out and do the performance audits, sometimes we'll see some brand new, beautiful fire stopping and smoke sealant installed, and some communications guys come and poke a wire through it, because they run their wires. They kind of have access to the building, but they don't take responsibility for it. So from a property management perspective, if you are putting in that sort of wiring, you've got to be chasing those guys to fire stop properly. And you don't get to just poke it through. The whole goal of a smoke seal is that if there's a fire, it seals. And so some guy would just put a hole through it and dumps a wire through that hole. So it's there's challenges in the old buildings, but we also can't just assume that the new buildings are easy.
And knowing where to use Wi-Fi and when to use solid internet connections as well. an elevator is a really hostile environment for internet. So, you know, if you're going to do it right, spend the money and get it wired properly. There's no wireless in the elevator.
From a legal perspective, that
just a
completely
thing.
means something different. An elevator is a hostile environment.
Well, these
From an
days.
internet perspective with Wi-Fi, that's excellent.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, just non-techie person, to see how the different areas overlap with
They
each
converge,
other.
yeah.
You know, we start with the kind of governance piece and how condos can get things done, but really that means communicating with the owners to figure out some hot button issues such as weed or you know, makeup air units, and trying to communicate that and having the technology there. Plus also being planning enough so that you don't take it in a piecemeal approach, that you see it collectively. So from that, I think we can take away quite a bit. But this is a changing landscape for condos, without a doubt.
And it's a lot like everything. The buildings are more complex, the systems are more complex, and the volunteer boards have a lot on their shoulders. So,
Yeah.
and the
absolutely.
managers do as well. So it's a lot to learn and a lot to deal with.
Okay, so I think that's our time. We're going to wrap things up. We thank you for joining us, and thank our hosts as well, and I want to thank our guests as
And
well
thank
too.
you, Joey.
Hopefully you join something out of that.
Thanks.
You guys have a great day.